welcome back to our podcast, Young and Heard. We're so glad that you're tuning in with us, and we have a super interesting topic. Can somebody drum roll, please? Excellent. We are going to be talking about bittersweet endings, transitions, and new beginnings. I know this is a season where a lot of people are finishing high school or maybe transitioning between grades. Some people are looking into summer jobs. And first, let's talk about bittersweet endings. How do we deal with like good seasons in our life coming to an end?
Well, sorry. Go. You said first.
Well, I think whenever something good does come to an end, I think we have to appreciate the time it was there, the time that we did spend, and like that during that time that it was good, and when it ends, I think we just have to appreciate that.
Yeah. What do you think? What were you gonna say?
So the question is, how do we deal with say it again?
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet.
Yeah.
Okay, because I had to think about that. Bittersweet. The way I think about that when you say that is like, oh, like it's a sweet ending because, like, for example, for high schoolers, seniors who are graduating this year, it's sweet because they're graduating, they're leveling up, they're going to the next chapter in their life. But it's also bitter because, you know, all of your regular routines of waking up, going to school is going to go away because you're graduating, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess, say the question again.
How do we deal with bittersweet endings?
Okay, so with that, dealing with it, it's more like, man, I don't know where to begin because usually whenever dealing with it, it's more like accepting it, you know? Because at the end of the day, you know, graduating is going to happen. You know, moving on with your new chapter in life is going to happen. So it's more like accepting the fact that it's happening and acknowledging the fact that it is.
Maybe just like being thankful. You know, some seasons in our life are going to change. And my mom always taught me sometimes God gives you friends for certain seasons in your life. And they weren't bad friends because your life went in different directions. And the same thing goes with mentors, with teachers, with things we enjoy. Sometimes God created a season in your life and put people and things around you to help you grow, but then you have to transition into something new. And now let's talk about the scariness of having to transition in life. What do you think, Iman?
I just think, you know, it's a very scary topic. Like me personally, I just, you know, when I think about just moving on, it's scary. But I just, you know, and really the thing you got to do is just put your faith in God and just, you know, let him control your life from here on out, you know, because there's always going to be better stuff in the future for you.
Yeah. Can you guys think of like a scary transition period in your life?
Well, for me, for sure, like since I put the example of graduating, for me was living my friends from high school. Because I obviously have my closest friends here at church, but I also had friends from high school. You're one of them. But I also have friends from high school, but those close friends were like those specific friends they have in high school that are close to you in your heart. Like they're close enough that you want them to be like the same friends that you have at church. Well, I'm gonna specify a little bit. But there was a moment where I did cry thinking of the fact that I don't get to see them anymore, you know? Those specific people that make you happy, makes you feel, gives you like a little nudge, like, you know what, I have to wake up, but I get to see this specific person that can make me smile, make me laugh, you know, and high school isn't that bad. But having to move on from those old friends and the fact that they might just move on without you, they might just make other friends and they might just have living their own life without me, you know.
Don't cry.
I'm not, but that's tough,
Yeah.
you know. So that's one of the difficult things that, I mean, has to happen, but it happened.
Yeah, in the Bible, we see that God's chosen people, God had given them this promise and told them, hey, you know what? You won't be slaves forever. You have a promised land. And he told them about these amazing promises that he gave them. But little did they know that they had to walk 40 years through the desert. And that was the time that God used to really work in the hearts of his people. And sometimes it's like that for us. God tells you, you know what? I have this amazing future plan for you. Or I have this degree, or I have this open door, or this job for you. And you're just like, yes, when is it going to happen? But little do we know that God's going to have us walk around the desert a little bit while he works on our hearts. Because he has things that are good for us, but he cares the most about our heart being in the right place, in the right position before we get to those blessings.
What I wanted to say is that we might have like different goals or different things we might want to achieve, but I feel like God's timing is always right. Because I feel like we're like, why hasn't this happened yet? Or why haven't I reached this goal yet? But it's not just about waiting, but it's about working in the waiting period.
Yeah. A lot of the things with God, they're like processes. And we can't just say, oh, I'm just waiting, and then not give the value to that time in our life where God is working in us, working in a process in us. But what are some things that we can like do, some practical advice just to build our faith up for the difficult transition times? How can we build trust in God's plan while we're transitioning? You know, Alexis?
Yeah, I'm trying to think to see if it makes sense what I'm about to say. So to build trust is more like you have to look at the results from the past experience you had, because you know, like for example, like moving on from high school is a new beginning, but there's gonna be something bigger in the near future that might be stronger than the way you felt that day, you know. So like for example, getting married, you know, that's gonna be a mega thing. You could be good or bad, but to prepare with it, I mean, you just have to look at the results.
Yeah.
Just look at the results from the past experience you had and just really like see it as a good, or even the bad things, you have to look at it and really acknowledge the fact that even with the bad, it's a blessing also, because everything happens because of God, you know, with the purpose with it.
Because you learn all things work for the good of those who love Him. What are some things that have helped you, Iman, in the hard transition times?
You know, it's just the people around me. You know, I learn from those, the good or bad, you know, good stuff. I learn from them. You know, growing up, I could use stuff like that for in the future. And basically just like, you know, what they teach me. And yeah, short, simple. Yeah.
And what are some good attitudes to have as we walk into the new season? Because we talk about saying goodbye to things we love. We talked about the difficult transition time that sometimes we don't expect. But what are some things for us to do as we walk into that promise that God gave us? Maybe you've been praying to get into a school and you got that letter. Or maybe you've been praying for a job, or maybe praying for a relationship, praying for an opportunity. Maybe you've been praying for your family to move to a new house. And finally, after praying and you have that promise, you stepping into this new season. What is the right attitude to have as we step into a new season?
I think just like we trusted God throughout the waiting period, that's what we should do after, and continue to trust in Him even when our promise is fulfilled, and just continue with His word, and not forget where we came from, not forget what He did.
That's true. I feel like we live in a country that is so privileged, and we have so many opportunities that are a true privilege. And for me, my mentality, or what I try to have the attitude is like, look, God gave me this privilege. I was able to go to school, I was able to go to college, but somebody else wasn't. Now it's my responsibility to use what God gave me for good. And I think sometimes the transition period helps you develop that, because it teaches you what you have is not because you're awesome, it's because God has been good to you. What are some ways that we can be thankful for the opportunities God gives us? You know, Alexis?
So different ways to like basically tell God that we appreciate everything He's done. Well, one from the last time I talked on stage was offerings, you know, because offerings are tied in with blessings. So even with an offering, it's more like you're being blessed and you're also blessing others with that single amount of money that you, from dearly from your heart, that you want to give. It's enough, you know.
And no matter what God may have given you, whether it's love or offering materialistic or not, I feel like we should share what God has given us with others around us.
Yeah, that's true. Because sometimes it's our testimony that is going to give somebody else the hope to walk through their process.
And I just wanted to add what she said, influencers too.
Yeah.
You know, like being an influence for the younger, and, you know, just helping them out growing up, you know, they can learn for the good.
Yeah.
I just want to add that.
But also, like, knowing what opportunities to seek. We can be influencers in that. We can teach him, hey, look, if you work hard, you can have this. If you honor God's principle, this is the kind of relationship you can have. If you honor your parents, if you do this, because the Bible has a lot of promises that are like that. And that's another way we can influence others. And I also wanted to ask you guys, I know sometimes we talk about topics for things we're going through, but how do we help our siblings or our friends that we know they're going through a tough transition? We know that God has promised them a new beginning and it's going to be amazing. We believe that. But right now, they're just in a tough transition where they don't see what they've been praying for. They feel alone. They feel forgotten. How can we help them?
For me, so I got a younger brother. He's like 1 year younger than me. What I started doing is that I started taking him to church so he can start volunteering with me.
Yeah.
And, you know, I always pay attention to the stuff he does because he reminds me of when I used to go to high school and the stuff I used to do. And, you know, every time I see him that he needs help, I'm always there for him. I always ask him. He usually doesn't tell me, but I know.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I see him going through a tough time, I always bring him around my friends and, you know, a good people, and he can learn from them. And yeah, like I said, I take him to church too, so he can learn.
Yeah. Just being that example, being attentive to what other people need, that's a big help, because sometimes you're struggling through something and maybe you're younger and you're afraid to like tell someone, but just knowing that somebody's there for whatever you need lets you know that later on when you have a bigger problem, you can trust them, that they've got your back. What's another way we can help our friends?
I think as Christians, as we come to church, we should also, because I feel like there's also some friends that don't come. We have friends that don't come to church, so I feel like it's important to, even if they don't physically come here, but like maybe sending them like a Bible verse or a devotion or something to remind them that everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes even like the message you sent the other day in our group, those things are like, you never know what someone's going through. And I read it and I was like, man, that doesn't only tell me that Elizabeth has a sweet heart, but it tells me that God has worked through her in her heart and has walked through her deserts. And that's the thing. Because we walk the desert, because we walk through the bit tough transition times, we can turn around to our buddies, to the people we don't even know, to our siblings, to the generation that comes after and say, hey, it's going to be okay. I've walked through it. I know the sand is hot. I know you're thirsty. I know you're tired. I know you prayed over and over and over for this. I know you have a promise from God. I know, but just trust in God. And sometimes when you can't trust anymore, your friends will help you. Like sometimes when you're strengthened enough, your friends' strength are enough
pick
for
each
you.
other up.
Yeah. Do you guys have any final thoughts on like how to keep your eyes on the promises that God has given you?
I think just following His word and continue to trust in Him. I feel like that's the easiest thing that we can do.
Yeah. Read the Bible so you know what He promised, too. And also, don't lose hope. Like, I know sometimes when things get tough and you're like tired of praying for something, we kind of start forgetting what God has promised because our eyes are too focused on what we want and we don't have. So through this week, we just want to encourage you guys. I know that sometimes good things end, and we know that God has promised good things. But if you're in the middle ground, if you're in the middle process, just keep your hope on God. He has opened a way. He will make a way. And if He promised something, it's because He's going to do it. So thank you guys so much for being in this podcast with us. I always love sharing with you guys because I'm always surprised about how much you know God's heart at a young age, and it just fills me with hope. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to tune in next week.
For more of this podcast, follow us on Instagram at Grace Youth Espanol and at Young and Heard.